Let's go live now to Canberra. The Shadow Minister for Government Services, Bill Shorten, joins me live. Mr Shorten, thank you for your time. John Setka has just done an interview on radio. He's been asked about perceived threats he made against the crossbench. Do you perceive those so-called threats as an attempted intimidation?
Well, I don't think that he's advancing the case against the government legislation. That may be what he's trying to do, but I think it's proving counterproductive. The reality is this government has no plan and agenda, so they're just going back to their standard union bashing. But I think attacking the crossbench senators and criticising them when you want their votes, well, to be honest, it may work in the construction world, but it doesn't work in the political world.
And do you agree that he should go from Labor?
Yeah, I do. I think that he should leave the party, and I do support what Anthony and others are doing.
Do you think he should go from that leadership position within the union?
Well, ultimately, I think that'll be a matter for his members, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the party should decide who joins, and Anthony and the National Executive have made their view clear, and I do think that's the right call.
OK, so you're making the distinction between him leaving the Labor Party, which there is some control over within your party structure, but it's up to union members if they want him to leave the union structure.
Well, put it like this. Political parties should control who joins them, and they have that right. In unions or business organisations, it's up to the constituent members of those bodies to decide who represents them. But again, returning to perhaps the heart of your story this morning, if you want to convince crossbench senators to vote against anti-union legislation, coming out and criticising them, I don't know, you catch more bees with honey than you do with a stick, don't you?
OK, well, let's talk about the robodebt issue. A class action has now been launched. We heard from the Prime Minister on this morning. Let's have a quick listen.
I don't accept that characterisation, David, and I think some of the things the Labor Party have been saying of this have been overstated. But it's important that the government ensures that, when people are overpaid, that the taxpayers' money that has been overpaid to them is recovered. And the Labor Party did that when they were in government. They had similar processes, and we're following those processes, and we're actually recovering more debts now as a result. Where the system needs to be improved, then we'll always continue to do that. But we won't make any apologies.
So, Mr Shorten, the Prime Minister is standing by the practice. It is taxpayer funds, after all.
Well, first of all, he's not being truthful. This government changed the way which they were collecting alleged debts from people they've paid. Like, there's been a distinct change in the process. They've taken a lot of the Centrelink staff out of the system. They're just relying on a blanket computer algorithm to match up data from different sources, and it's creating a 1 in 5 error rate. I mean, if Mr Morrison was running a business which sent out letters of demand to 1 in 5 customers and said, you owe us, he'd be out on his ear. So, one, they're running a service which is causing great distress, and the media has been diligent in reporting it. Two, the way they're running it has changed since Labor was in, and it's causing more distress than ever. So I think this bloke should stop blaming the Labor Party and stop treating Australian citizens as debtors until the individual can prove otherwise. It's not the job of the government to pick on individuals, to send them a letter of demand and a debt, not explain why they owe the debt, and then, with all of the grave consequences of being found to be a debtor, bully people into paying money, which, even by their own admissions, has got an error rate of 160,000 people receiving these demands, and they were just wrong.
Bottom line, though, if you're not entitled to it, should you have to pay it back?
Bottom line is the government shouldn't be asking for money it's not entitled to collect back from people. Of course, if you've been overpaid, you shouldn't be. I get that. But, that's not the issue, is it? You've really got to ask yourself, is it the role of government to reverse the onus, say to some uni student who was eligible for an Austudy payment, who'd done some part-time work at another part in the year, and just say, you owe us the money, or some battler who's been unemployed and say you get a letter of demand, or some carer? Is it really fair that the government oppresses individuals? And it's not me saying it. Even the government say we've got 1 in every 5 has been absolutely wrong. That's 1 in every 5 means 160,000 of our fellow Australians have received a letter of demand from Big Brother saying, give us money, we won't tell you how you owe it, and they were wrong.
Just finally, does Labor need to repair its relationship with corporate Australia?
I think that Labor needs to win some votes that we didn't get at the last election. And I notice some people say you're anti-business or pro-business. Listen, I'm pro-small business, pro-farmer, pro-pensioner, pro-worker, but I'm also pro-corporate responsibility. And I make no apology for pushing the banks to have a royal commission or saying that multinationals should pay their fair share of tax. So, of course, we need to work with everyone, and I'm very supportive of what's being said. And, but I also know I took a bit of skin off myself because I pushed to having a banking royal commission, which Mr Morrison opposed 26 times.
So you think you lost some political skin because of the push for the banking royal commission? In what way, electorally or in the corporate sector?
Oh, no, just and some elements of business were very unhappy that I was pushing for a banking royal commission. No, I think the people wanted it. But, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all in this together in Australia, and it's not just a matter of powerful institutions, it's a matter of ordinary people. And I think the way that the banks treated ordinary people was wrong, and I'm very proud that in my time we were able to get up a banking royal commission from opposition.
I note you haven't used the term top end of town this morning. Is that a conscious effort?
Well, no. I was just answering your question about Labor working with business. We understand in our economy you've got to have successful business. I'm a centrist. I've always understood that for workers to have jobs, business has got to make profits. But I think increasingly in modern Australia, a lot of Australians, small businesses, everyday workers, blue and white collar workers, get fed up when they see that some of the big companies don't seem to pay their fair share of tax, or when banks were behaving in a high-handed manner to individuals. It's not black and white, but certainly what is the case is that I think that people expect everyone to, adhere to the same set of rules.
When the debate on tax cuts was going on, you often used the term top end of town. I think the new leadership has decided that probably wasn't a helpful term. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not going to speak for anyone else, but, even Mr Morrison gave up pushing corporate tax cuts for big corporations. At the end of the day, if you're going to make a decision about who you look after in Australia, I want to fight for fairness. I didn't support big corporate tax cuts for big business. And even the government now agrees with me. So does that make them anti-business?
Well, I'm not sure. They would probably say no. But, I mean, just finally, where do you draw that line, top end of town? Where's the distinction? Who's the top end of town?
Well, my view is that multinationals who don't pay their fair share of tax in Australia should. My view is that big corporations do have a role to behave with corporate responsibility. But as Anthony's saying today, they've also got a right to have their point of view and to engage in some of the debates about where society's going. At the end of the day, I'm rapt that we pushed for a banking royal commission. The government voted against it 26 times. And I'm very certain that it was a mistake to propose giving big tax cuts to big corporations.